It was the 20th of August, 2020. A man sat down at a Siberian airport. He was waiting to catch a flight from Tomsk to Moscow. As he sat, he ordered a tea and then boarded his flight. Shortly after the flight took off, the man yelled out in pain. Witnesses report the man gasping for air, convulsing, and fighting to breathe. He was then flown to a hospital in Germany where doctors worked to save his life. Shortly afterward, it was discovered that the man had come in contact with one of the deadliest nerve agents known to man, called A232, more commonly known as Novichok, a chemical about 2 times more potent than the notorious VX nerve agent and produced in only one place in the world, Russia. And who is the man, you might ask? His name is Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Putin's only political rival, and his only crime was daring to challenge Putin's power. This served as confirmation to the entire world. The KGB is not dead, it simply has a new name. And this is The Art of Falling from Windows, an overview of Russian assassination in the era of the FSB. Let's reminisce for a minute. We all remember the KGB, one of the defining agencies of the Cold War, and an agency known for secrecy, dark operations, and assassinations. The KGB were in essence the secret police of the Soviet Union. And when the Union fell in 1991, some thought that might be the end of the agency as we knew it. They were wrong. Years later in 1995, Boris Yeltsin founded the FSB, and some thought it might operate very similarly to the CIA in the United States. They were also wrong. While at first the FSB wasn't as powerful as the KGB, the framework was now in place to put the axe to the grind once again. And that's what happened in 1998 when a young and relatively unknown man by the name of Vladimir Putin was appointed head of the FSB. Putin, being a former KGB officer, was well versed in the old ways and quickly transformed the FSB. When Putin eventually replaced Yeltsin and became president of Russia, the FSB's power grew once again, which many experts claim restored the agency to KGB levels of power. As some would say, the boys were back in town. And this is where things get dark. The FSB are currently on track to become one of the most feared and deadly agencies in Russia. They are slowly building upon the art of conducting wet matters, which is how the agency refers to precision killings. There are currently 4 commonly known methods of assassinations, which include chemical and radiological weapons, projectile weapons, manual assassination, and explosive weapons. Each method is chosen with a desired effect in mind. For example, chemical and radiological weapons and manual assassination are stealthy, easier to conceal, and in some instances can be delivered without direct contact. These methods are typically used when the FSB need to eliminate a political adversary while avoiding direct evidence back to the Kremlin. On the other hand, explosive and projectile weapons are loud, attention-grabbing, and dramatic. These methods are used by the FSB when they want to make an example of a political adversary to deter future followers. One of the most brutal assassinations conducted by the FSB was the case of Alexander Litvinenko. In this case, the chosen method of assassination was a radiological weapon. Litvinenko was a former officer of the FSB and had defected to the United Kingdom after being granted asylum. The assassination began in November of 2006, and over the course of a month, Litvinenko would lie in Barnet General Hospital in London, dying of radiation sickness after ingesting polonium-210. The death was slow and painful, very similar to the agonizing deaths suffered by some of the liquidators at the Chernobyl nuclear disaster in 1986. This was one of the most demented and twisted examples of the brutality of the FSB. The day following Litvinenko's death, Putin was seen telling reporters that, quote-unquote, Mr. Litvinenko is, unfortunately, not Lazarus. A vague and haunting statement seeming to publicly acknowledge his involvement. At this point, you might have wondered why I said the art of falling from windows. That's because in Russia, it's becoming a very popular art form, at least for these guys. And just like some people like to paint houses, if you know you know, some people enjoy helping others find their way to the ground faster. And that is exactly what the FSB is doing today. Ever since the Russia-Ukraine war began, there have been over 15 cases of high-profile Russian businessmen which have suddenly died under mysterious circumstances. The most recent of which is the director of a Russian railroad company, who allegedly shot himself and then fell from the balcony of his apartment. He had just returned from a vacation and had 0 signs of distress. And that isn't all. The FSB is just getting started. On September 1st, Ravil Maganov, the chairman of Russian oil company Lukoil, was hospitalized and then magically stumbled, falling through a hospital window to his death. The security cameras were, unfortunately, turned off for repairs at the time of his death. 9 days later, on September 10th, Ivan Pechorin, an aviation director for a Russian company, fell from his boat, drowned, and then was found washed up on shore. He had just met with Putin a few days prior to his death. Then just 10 days later, on September 21st, Anatoly Gerashenkov, the former head of the Moscow Aviation Institute, fell down an unusually tall flight of stairs and died. He had recently expressed his concerns about the motivations for Russia's involvement in the Ukraine war. These are only a few examples, but I think you get the point. There is no concrete proof of the FSB's involvement, but all of these cases share one aspect in common. The victims had either just met with Putin a few days prior to their death, or they had spoken publicly about the war in Ukraine. We can logically assume that they were likely manually assassinated by either pushing, shoving, or throwing the victims from extreme heights. This form of assassination is almost impossible to prove without video evidence or witness testimony, and in every single case, this evidence did not exist. What we see today is the beginning of a new era for the FSB. It's not only an intelligence agency, but also a secret police force that wields incredible power in Russia. The consequences of the Russia-Ukraine war, along with Vladimir Putin's fear of a political ousting, will likely cause the agency to become one of the deadliest in Russia's history. And that's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye for now.